couple of years. So I've got no doubts that the work that we have to do together is going to be interesting, it's going to be challenging, and it's going to be ultimately very rewarding. And that work is not done mostly here at this board. You know, we set the tone, we implement the strategy set by the Integrated Care Partnership, and we ensure that we're managing risk and taking opportunities. Most of the work gets done in places, neighbourhoods, people's homes, by providers, by our 100,000 staff working across health and care, 150,000 or so volunteers, and 400,000 people who care for somebody informally because they love them or feel a sense of duty. So we've really got to maximise our partnership's impact, and I've got every confidence that we can because of what we've been doing for the last 6 years. Whether that's on supporting informal carers, thinking about the role of the third sector in joining up care, the support we gave to folks who are shielding, the vaccination programme, innovation and enterprise, which is case finding chronic kidney disease in poorer communities using technology and citizen power. There's all sorts of examples that we can all describe, which make us proud, as Karen Coleman would say, proud to work for this partnership. And above all, I would say that we need to ensure that that's what we retain, that sense of partnership. We collaborate, and it's difficult. Anyone who thinks collaboration is easy isn't doing it right. You know, we collaborate, we have difficult, tough conversations because we have to get to the right outcome, and we face up to the issues that are in front of us. So I'm really delighted that we're here today. This is a board, as I said, that will set the tone, will help to implement the strategy in an organisation, in a system, which is made up of the partners represented around this table. Citizens, providers, and you know, third sector and others. And we need to make sure that we maximise every opportunity that we can. I'm really delighted to be working with you all too, and looking forward to the last few appointments to the board through the 2 partner members and the independent non-exec members too. So thanks very much. That's all I was going to say, Kathy.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much for helping to set the tone today. I think we all agree on the mission and the direction of travel. We're all here with a common aim, and for me personally is around working together to tackle inequalities and make sure we truly are offering seamless access to care to all our residents across West Yorkshire. But in talking about partnerships, and Rob has talked about working in places and with sectors, we also have a very good working relationship with our colleagues at NHS England and our regional team. And Anthony, I hadn't forgotten you. Would you introduce yourself, because you are a connection to our regional team and into NHS England nationally?
Yes, thanks, Kathy. Morning, everyone. I'm Anthony Keeley. I'm the Locality Director for NHS England for West Yorkshire, and I represent the partnership. I represent NHS England in the partnership, leading on issues such as planning and performance and improvement.
Great, thank you very much. So, colleagues, we've got a lot to do ahead of us, and what you'll see later in particularly as we get towards the end of the meeting in item 9, we've got a board forward plan there that gives us a framework on how we can work together, which Ian is going to talk us through, and how we decide together based on what our partnership is, bringing through strategies and place plans and place priorities, and particularly working with place committees. And we must remember they are officially set up in a statutory format from today as well, and how we all work together as an ecosystem. As Rob says, partnership working is not easy, but I think we've all worked very hard on it over the last 5 to 6 years or so. So we've got a wonderful bedrock and foundation to work from. So particularly for people watching this meeting either live or on record, we have a film today that we wanted to share. It's just very short, but also for colleagues here today as part of the Integrated Care Board and the partnership. We hope this is a helpful way in which to explain our ways of working from today. So I'm going to hand over to Lauren now, who's going to show the film for us.
West Yorkshire Health and Care Partnership is one of 42 integrated care systems in the country. Since 2016, we have been providing joined-up care to improve the lives of people in our 5 local places. That's Bradford District in Craven, Calderdale, Kirklees, Leeds and Wakefield District. We work together in neighbourhoods with place partnerships and provider collaboratives within the NHS, social care, Health Watch, voluntary community social enterprises, hospices, charities and communities. Our new Integrated Care Board, a statutory organisation governed by our partners and representatives across local health and social care, will help us to achieve better outcomes for you and all the other people living in West Yorkshire. That's 2.4 million of you. The Integrated Care Board is a new type of organisation which will help us to make a positive difference to the issues that matter to you, including cancer care, learning disabilities, mental health, carer support, social care, racism and climate change by joining services up even more, ensuring people have access to the care they need in the right place. For example, in their homes, communities, GP surgeries and hospitals, and have enough staff to support you, including recruiting more people. We are investing around £5 billion in West Yorkshire to improve health and well-being and reduce health inequalities. This is an investment in you, our colleagues and our communities. Together we can make sure that everyone has not only their best start in life, but every chance to live a long, happy, healthy life. For more information on the work of NHS West Yorkshire Integrated Care Board, visit www.westyorkshire.icb.nhs.uk.
Thank you very much, Lauren. I thought that was a very helpful way in which we can set the scene for us today. So there are a lot of resources out on our website, our West Yorkshire Partnership website, but particularly around the Integrated Care Board. That's helpful, hopefully, for you as colleagues in the partnership, as well as for members of the public to have a look at the variety of information that's available there on our work and our purpose. So I'm going to move us now into the business of our meeting today. One thing I wanted to note in terms of declarations of interest from September, when the 20th September, which is our next meeting in public, we will particularly have a conflicts of interest matrix already in place so that we can have that in the public domain for people to see across the whole of the membership of our Integrated Care Board, as well as taking conflicts of interest declarations at each meeting in relation to the agenda. And thank you to Jane Madeley for being our conflict of interest guardian, which we'll note later. Okay, so on to item 2 of our meeting. We've got the minutes of the Shadow Board meeting on the 17th of May. As I said earlier, for members of the public, all those meeting documents are available online for you to see. Colleagues, first of all, in terms of those minutes of the meeting, are there any corrections or amendments at all? I just want to check that's a true reflection of our meeting together on the 17th of May. People nodding. Okay, if there's anything in detail, please could you email my colleagues Stephen Gregg and Laura Ellis if you've got anything. We do have some matters arising coming out of the meeting. We want to particularly note that we reviewed the operational plan in line with NHS England guidance. Anthony, would you particularly, just to remind colleagues as well as for our minutes, just note what we discussed at that meeting on the 17th of May.
Yes, thanks, Kathy. So under item 7 of the agenda on 17th of May, the Shadow Board, we received as a Shadow Board the ICS operational plan for 22-23. Since then, there have been some further development to the planning process, which is an effective response to sort of national NHS planning guidance and requirements. So there are a couple of material changes to the plan that was received on 17th of May, which I would just like to the board to note. Probably the most significant is at that stage, the plan included a system financial deficit of around 73 million. And since all of the ICS plans were submitted, NHS England identified some further national funding of around 1.5 billion to be allocated to address pressures such as the unfunded inflationary pressures which had arisen since the previous autumn financial settlement for the NHS. And our allocation from that additional funding allowed the financial deficit to be closed essentially in our plan. So our plan has now moved from a 73 million system deficit to an essentially balanced plan with a number of risks contained within that, but that's clearly a material change to the plan that we submitted. And then the other material change was around the profile of planned or elective care for the year. So this is the level of activity that trusts are able to provide for patients to tackle waiting lists and as far as possible tackle the backlogs that have arisen during the pandemic. There's a planning requirement to achieve levels of activity measured by value of at least 104% of what we were achieving pre-pandemic. And the plan that we received on 17th of May was in line with that requirement. We were looking to deliver 105.6%, I think, so that's above the 104% threshold. And in the resubmission of the plan towards the end of June, trusts took the opportunity to look at how activity had actually been delivered during April and May, which was a period still affected by the Omicron levels of activity of COVID at that stage. So therefore, elective activity wasn't going as rapidly as had initially been planned. So that's been reviewed, and we have new profiles for the rest of the year. The new profiles are still compliant with the 104% requirement, but slightly less than the initial plan we looked at in May. So it's gone down from 105.6 to 104.9. So it's still a compliant plan, but it just changes the balance of activity and reduces the level of potential elective recovery funding we're eligible for by around 5.5 million. So those are just two changes to the plan. There are a range of risks which we looked at in the plan in May. I won't repeat them now for brevity, but we're continuing to work to mitigate those risks across the system and to make sure that the plan is being implemented in line with our priorities.
Great, thank you very much, Anthony. And what I'd ask, as I mentioned at the earlier part of the meeting, perhaps if you, with colleagues, could provide an update for all of the Integrated Care Board members on where we're up to on the operational plan, any risks and concerns in the system, as well as best practice that's taking place at this moment. I think that'd be really helpful. Some colleagues are very much in the detail of this day to day, and others are not so. So I think that would be helpful as an action from this meeting.
Yes, very happy to do that. We'll do that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. And then Stephen, the action log, what have you got to highlight for us from that last meeting?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, we picked up a couple of actions from the last meeting that we put on the action log. One is to follow up on the citizen voice item, and we said we would report back on the outcomes as a result of the Health Watch recommendations, and we're planning to do that at the September meeting. And then the second item was around the ICS operational plan that Anthony's just been talking about, when we said we would report back on the quality impact assessment of efficiency plans. And what we're proposing to do is to take that first to our quality committee and provisionally bring it back to the board on the 15th of November. Okay.
Thank you very much. So we'll, as we work together in this new statutory board arrangement, we'll make sure that we're making sure that we're tracking those actions and the work plan. I think this is particularly helpful for our non-exec member colleagues coming through who'll be working on committee work. Tom, you have your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to make the point just to commend the team for the balanced position, which was incredibly challenging. And I think it shows the maturity of the partnership that we've been able to do that across place, which is great. I did want to make the point that obviously the NHS and the health bit of the system depends on the rest of the system to work well as well. And that local authority and social care has not had a sort of equivalent amount of money to deal with backlogs and the impact of the pandemic post last year. So although we were really pleased with the government support during the pandemic, we haven't had the equivalent support. So that obviously leads to pressure in the system and will put pressure as we move forward. I think it's just important to sort of clock that as an issue, given that we're a system board. There's no actions that we can take, but it's important everybody sort of is aware of that.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Just very briefly, Rob, you got in before. I was going to say, could you just respond on that? You're right, Tom. We're a partnership, we're a system, and we work together. Rob.
So today really is a meeting of getting the constitutional arrangement set up, isn't it? But it's right for Tom to flag some of these strategic risks that we have, I think. And the conversation we've been having around developing the board assurance framework places this, I think, as one of the big risks for all of us. So just to assure the board, two things I think will are linked to this conversation we're having. First is that the plan that we've signed off will be the thing that we measure our performance against, absolute standards and the plan in the dashboard, the performance dashboard that will come to every board meeting and be overseen by the committees. So when we come to the next formal meeting, what I expect is we will have performance against plan and absolute standards, and then we'll also have the board assurance framework and the mitigations that we need to think about when it comes to pressures elsewhere. So this big strategic risk, I think, on local government finances and other finances actually in the system is something that's in view. And we have in the past made decisions and choices together to address some of that. So the £12 million that we put into local government to fund national living wage earlier than required last September is a really good example of that. But I think Tom flags a really helpful point and exemplifies the kind of issue that this board's really going to have to discuss.
Okay, thank you, Rob, for responding. Hannah, and then I am going to move us on to the next item. Hannah.
All right, just quickly, I suppose just to say the item particularly around citizen voice, I suppose just as we've been talking about before, the work that we've done here starting today isn't the starting point of this. We've been bringing the key themes from what people have been telling us across West Yorkshire over the past number of years. So the report that we took to the Shadow Board was some of the key themes that we've been hearing as local health watchers and wider partners around variation in access to GPs, around access to NHS dentistry, about people's experiences in care homes, around the move to digital. And I suppose it's great to be back in September, but the ambitions of the partnership are to be driven by the people of West Yorkshire as well, and it needs to closely align with the business plan of the Integrated Care Board from what people are telling us as well.
Yeah. And Hannah, I know that you were presented to us at the 17th of May meeting on recommendations of what this board should be looking at and the priorities. So I think I don't want to simplify it in any way, but I to take on board your point in aligning that with board assurance framework, integrated performance reporting, and actually making that commitment that we made on the 17th of May a reality, so we can connect that together. We must be driven by the experiences of people using our services and local residents. So thank you. Please continue to raise those kind of things. That's why you have this voice on the board as well. So thank you. Okay. So we move on now to item 3, public questions. We don't have any public questions today, but that does what I wanted to do though in this agenda item is just reflect questions that we've had previously. Particularly, we have a number of people who are active in asking questions through our what was previously called our partnership board. One thing I wanted to reflect, there was a question late last year around having a handbook for this new integrated care board, which we are about to approve today. We have had public questions to partnership board on the purpose and the benefits of integrated care, which I think is a fair challenge and something we've all got to work on together in our partnership and through this board particularly. And if you remember our one-off Shadow Board meeting on the 17th of May, we had a number of questions around staff welfare, mental health, working in A&E services, for example, from a staff governor. So for anyone watching this live or afterwards, and a message particularly to a number of people working out in our system who have connections with members of the public and with governors through Foundation Trust, for example, and the NHS, is please come forward and ask questions. Our deadline for the next meeting will be the 19th of September, but we are always open to receiving these questions, and my colleagues here are very happy to answer them as they did on the 17th of May. But for me, I just wanted to reflect how we're making connections through previous questions. Okay, so we're going to move on now to item 4, which is our ICB constitution and standing orders. This is a document that has had a number of moments of scrutiny and has been out for consultation. It's been approved by NHS England and it has been published by them. We received confirmation on the 1st of June from the Regional Director of NHS England and NHS Improvement of the document. I think particular thanks to so many people who took the time to give feedback on our constitution, members of the public, members of our partnership. I know some people went line by line through it, governance experts particularly. So we're really grateful to people for giving that kind of feedback. Stephen, I don't know if there's anything you want to share as we note our constitution and standing orders being approved.
No, I don't think much to add to what you've said, Chair. It went through a period of extensive involvement from November to January. We reflected a lot of those comments. We published online our response to the involvement period. And as you say, it's now been approved by NHS England, so presented to the board for noting.
Great, thank you. And that's available on our website for anyone to view for reference and also to take on board in terms of the work. Okay, and thank you again to everybody who's been involved in that, including Stephen. Okay, so we then move on to item 5, which we have a number of documents together to approve today. This is about demonstrating our readiness to operate as an integrated care board. It reflects many, many months of work. And if not years of working together in partnership and the learning that we've gained from that in bringing together a number of documents to support us and give us the governance foundations to set up as an integrated care board. We have Laura and Jonathan who are going to talk us through this and are happy to take questions. What I'd ask, if you have anything very detailed on any of these documents, please could you submit them by email to Laura Ellis, and we will record them and take them on board. And also what we need to do today as well is track together which committees these will be going to, either that they've got the responsibility and oversight, or actually that they might be having a look in more detail on them to come back to the Integrated Care Board. But all these documents are about our readiness to operate. Laura, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you, and good morning everybody. My name's Laura Ellis, I'm the Director of Corporate Affairs. I'm going to lead us through the introduction to this agenda item, and then when we get to the questions, Jonathan and I are going to handle them between us depending on what they relate to. So as we heard on the previous item, the Integrated Care Board, the ICB constitution sets out our high level arrangements, and this is all underpinned by the ICB governance handbook. It forms a large part of our agenda papers today, appreciate several hundred pages, and it contains a wealth of critical information about how we will work. Included within the handbook are details of how we will make decisions. It contains details around our scheme of reservation and delegation that explains where and who will make those decisions, and our standing financial instructions. And you'll also find the terms of reference for each of our committees, and that includes the 5 place committees. And then a number of key governance policies make up the remainder of the handbook. What I wanted to just take a moment to do is to draw your attention to a particular page within the handbook, which I think is really helpful as a summary really of how we will work as an ICB. I'm just going to attempt to share it. So it is page 12 of the report, if you want to refer to it on there, just whilst I'm putting it up. Hopefully that is on its way through, so people will be able to see. Do appreciate there's quite a lot of writing on this page. So the reason I wanted to particularly share it was because I think it is that summary page really of a lot of the detail that's contained in the hundreds of pages within the handbook. It sets out the Integrated Care Board's functions, it sets out how decisions will happen, it maps those decisions, and versions of this document have been shared really widely during the extensive engagement we've done over the last few months and as we've developed our working arrangements. And I know it has been really positively received because it quite nicely summarises on a single page how the different component parts will work together and the nature of the relationship between them. So I appreciate there's quite a lot of small writing on here. It is in your agenda pack for you to have a look at in more detail. And perhaps what I would just highlight is that you will see on the left-hand side, the green box on the left-hand side, the board. And so you can see yourselves today there and then see how you relate to the other parts of the system. So I didn't want to say anything in detail on that. I'm sure people will have had a look at it, but I thought it was just helpful to highlight. I think also forming part of the paper today are a number of other important governance documents setting out different governance arrangements, and they include our operational scheme of delegation, each of our 5 place partnership agreements. We also have details of our place section 75 arrangements and a delegation agreement for primary medical services. So a real wealth of information there today. It is important, I think, to note that the governance handbook and those associated documents are designed to give us the flexibility to adapt our arrangements as we move forward. They are not set in stone today, and they remain in development. They have been prepared in readiness for the 1st of July, but we absolutely know that they will need reviewing and adapting over the next few months as we reflect on the learning that will come. And our committees and our partnership collaborative forums will play a really vital role in that, in terms of reviewing those documents. So, for example, we will expect the terms of reference to go to the first meetings of each of those committees, some of which may have met in shadow form but have not met formally yet. So I'm sure there will be learning from those, and we will take that on board and review them in the coming months. The report sets out the decisions that you're being asked to make today. I appreciate there's quite a few of those. In respect of the documents that are forming part of the governance handbook itself, you are being asked to approve those, please. And in respect of the place partnership agreements, the Section 75 arrangements and the Primary Medical Services Delegation Agreement, you are being asked to authorise the Chief Executive to sign those on behalf of the Integrated Care Board. I did just want to draw your attention, if I could, to a specific requirement in respect of the Remuneration and Nomination Committee. So for all of our other committees, our scheme of reservation and delegation gives the chair responsibility for approving the appointment of members. However, that doesn't include the Remuneration and Nomination Committee, which requires board approval for those members. The proposed membership is set out within the terms of reference, which forms part of your documents today. And just to note, as we have not yet appointed 2 of the non-executive members who form part of that membership, we are proposing an interim arrangement for the first meeting in line with what's allowed in those terms of reference. And the final point from me before I pause to see if there's any questions is just to note that once we have approved, hopefully, the governance documents today that form part of the report, they will be going onto our website as virtual documents so people can easily navigate through them. There are going to be easy read versions and hopefully some clear signposting, because these are documents that people will want to keep referring back to. There's a lot of detail there, so you can expect to see those on our website shortly. I'll pause there. Thank you, Kathy, and see if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you, Laura, and thank you to so many colleagues who've worked on these documents. I'd welcome questions in general on the, I suppose, the suite of documents together, and then we will go item by item to approve them, and then note if anyone's got any specific comments about specific documents. So, Becky, I think you had your hand up first. Becky.
Hi, I think I think what's fantastic about our constitution is the principles about openness and transparency and engagement, and you being fully accountable. And Rob, it was lovely to hear you recognising the sacrifice children have made for us all during the pandemic. I think when we look at the governance documents and these, it would be really helpful about where decisions get made to have some sort of case study, and maybe children and young people is a really good one. They're very complex services. As a member of the public, if I'm looking in, it would be really helpful to know if I have a child that is struggling with mental health, where is it that happens? Where do decisions happen about resourcing that and supporting that? So maybe a case study that goes alongside, particularly the sense of us working in a way that supports place and local, as public members can sometimes fear that nobody takes a decision in that situation. So that would be really helpful.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a very good suggestion. I assume, Rob, Laura, Stephen, that's possible. I think that's would be really welcome to bring them to life and to show the accountability that comes with that. Rob? I
think in developing the arrangements that are in front of us today, we've tried that, Becky, in terms of 2 or 3 different types of decision you might want to make. So what happens in a pandemic situation where you got to make a decision today? What happens if you want to look at the future strategic direction for children's services? What happens if the money's off in one place? What happens across the system? So we've definitely got into that way of working, and I think you're right. If we can describe that publicly, that would be really helpful.
Great, thanks, Becky. Fatima.
So as you all know, I'm a massive fan of governance because I think it can be a real enabler for transformation. And I think what I was really pleased to see, particularly from a race equality network perspective, was how EDI was embedded all the way through. I mean, I don't know if you've done a search of how many times it's been mentioned in the document, but I certainly did. It was pleasing to see. I think the other bit that is really important is the link between equality, diversity, inclusion and quality. And I think the quality impact assessments are going to be an absolute game changer once we start to embed them. where we're not only just supporting our rhetoric on making ourselves the most inclusive partnership we can be, but also really expressing our intent with that link between health inequalities and delivering the best quality services for West Yorkshire. So it's a really solid foundation, and thank you to everyone for their hard work.
Great, thank you. And then actually it becomes default. It's a habit, isn't it? We always do an equality impact assessment. It's not an exceptional thing. Okay, thank you. Are there any other colleagues that want to make any comments in general on the suite of documents we have here?
Can I just say thank you to the place leads and place representatives for all the work that's gone into the arrangements around the place committees. You know, they're only, there's one of each, I think, under 6A, B, C, D, E, which might make it sound look like it was quite a straightforward process, but we shouldn't underestimate the amount of time, effort, energy, relationship building that's gone into getting those arrangements in place and what's required to make them a success. So I just wanted to pass on my thanks to everybody who's been involved in those processes.
Yeah, great, thank you. And for the minutes, actually, because we did a roll call earlier of people working within the ICB, our place committee chairs, as outlined in the document there, for Bradford District and Craven, Elaine Appleby, for Calderdale, John Molyneux, Kirklees, Liz Meir, Leeds, Rebecca Charwood, and for Wakefield District, Dr. Anne Carroll. So we're grateful to them as well for putting themselves forward to be part of this new way of working, and so all the health and care leaders and partners who've worked by place. And I know in my previous role working in Bradford District and Craven, the amount of time we took together in looking at ways of working and decision making. So I'm grateful to all the work that's done in place there. Okay, any other general comments on the suite of documents? If not, I'll go one by one in a moment. Jonathan, is there anything you want to share?
Thanks, Chair. I suppose probably just two things really. One is, I suppose I was reminded from Rob's comments around the work that's gone in through the ICS governance group that's met on a fortnightly basis over the last sort of 6 to 9 months or so, chaired by Tim Riley, to bring these documents together, and they have been developed in a way that's absolutely trying to support our principle around subsidiarity, trying to sort of build on the good partnership working we've done in the past. I guess the other thing to say is around it is worthwhile the board being aware that not all, but some of these documents have been based upon model templates that have been issued by NHS England that we've adapted for our local circumstances. And I think the final thing, just to reiterate Laura's point, really, I think, you know, as we start to use these in practice, I'm sure we'll find there are some things that just don't work for us and don't reflect the way that we want to work, and we will have to change them. So I guess it's just a bit of a plea to us all to say, look, let's just accept them for what they are. Let's be constructive and productive about revisions and amendments, and let's try and be fleet of foot, because we will need to amend, I think, in the coming months. I am hoping that it's months rather than weeks that that those issues start to emerge, to be honest. But yes, but thank you, Chair.
That's great, thank you. And we have committed, particularly with the place committee work, to have a review in 12 months' time, and then to implement learning within 18 months. And we'll do the same for our integrated care board. So as we look at the decision-making map, we will do that as we do the review. And also at our last partnership board meeting to become the integrated care partnership earlier in June, we agreed that we would have a moment to review together as an overall partnership the relationship between the integrated care partnership and the new integrated care board as well. So I agree with you, Jonathan, this is work in progress. It's iterative, isn't it? And I'm grateful to everyone who has made sure that we have worked alongside the national guidance, as well as made sure that it works for our partnership, because I know colleagues have had concerns as to whether we are going to hold on to the good culture that we have here in our partnership, and our aim is to do so even in those kind of documents. And Anthony, thank you to you and Richard Barker, our Regional Director, for your support in that as well. Okay, so I'm going to take us through these documents. I think for anyone particularly working in the committees going forward, though some arrangements are still to be confirmed, if you want to flag with me committee work that could come out of some of these documents, please let me know. And I was talking through with non-exec colleagues yesterday about plans. So first of all, we're asking you to approve number 1, how we make decisions, including our functions and decisions map. Colleagues, are we happy to approve that as it is today? It's hard on screen, so I'm going to take you nodding as a yes. And if you've got any objection or a query or a question or a comment, can you please put your hands up, and then we can work that through. Okay, the second one is the scheme of reservation and delegation. Are there any comments on that one at all? Are we happy to approve that? Yeah, if you would nod, that helps me as we go through. Oh, or thumbs up as Rob Webster has just done, that's great. Item 3, the standing financial instructions. Jonathan and thank you, thumbs up, that's also helpful. Jonathan and Jane, is there just something you want to comment on standing financial instructions, just some oversight of that document as we go into governance arrangements? Do we want to bring that into some committee work? That's the point of my question.
Thanks, Kathy. I mean, as a document, it's a document that's reserved for the board as opposed to delegated to the committee as part of our scheme of reservation delegation. This is probably the one document that most largely mirrors the national template. And I think what spans out of that are a number of supporting policies that we need to have in place across the ICB. I think it would be appropriate for the Finance Committee to review it. It's also worth saying from an audit perspective is that we have reviewed or asked our Audit Yorkshire colleagues, our internal audit provider, to review all of the financial policies as part of the development, and we'll continue to do so in any amendments.
That's great, thank you. Jane, you've got your hands up.
Yeah, I was only going to confirm, actually, as Jonathan said, I think it's the Finance Committee area that they would look at as opposed to Audit Committee. There are some other elements later that will definitely be coming back to Audit Committee to have a look at, but I think that SFI one is a Finance Committee review, please. Thanks.
Okay, that's great, thank you. And Jane, we note that our aim is for you as Audit Chair to sit on the Finance Committee to provide that connection in our governance work. Okay, so are we happy to approve standing financial instructions? Yes, okay. Financial scheme of delegation. Jonathan, Jane, you were starting to talk through this as well. Is there anything to add, or shall we go straight to approving it? Jonathan.
If a major start, I mean, again, this will fall within the remit of the Finance, Investment and Performance Committee. I think this is the one that operationally will require the most review. So I don't expect the place committees necessarily to get involved in this on a detailed basis, but the supporting committees to the place committees may have views on this in terms of how we operationalise it.
Okay, so that can form part of the place committee review that we're committing to. Great, thank you. All right, well, we're happy to approve it today, and then particularly note that this one will go through a review over the next few months. Yeah, great, thank you. Make sure I'm on the right track here. Operational scheme of delegation. Are there any comments at all, or are we happy to approve it? Happy to approve. Okay, I'm taking nods, thumbs up. Yeah. Okay, then we get into terms of reference for Integrated Care Board ICB committees. So we'll first of all take the place committee ones. I just wondered from place leads at all, is there any, do you have any comments or reflections at all as we are here formally approving the terms of reference for these committees, but is there anything you'd like to share on the work of the committees going forward from today? Feel free to put your hands up and share any reflections at all. I know it's been a journey of the last few months to get there. I'm putting place leads on the spot here now. No, Tim, I was going to pick on you because you've been part of the governance as well. Do you feel that's reflective of how we want to work together over the next 12 months?
Yes, thanks, Kathy. Yes, it is, and it was really good. And Jonathan's mentioned the governance group, and colleagues from all the places were involved on that governance group, and there was a lot of really good debate that was then sort of a to and fro between colleagues in places and the Yorkshire ICB, ICS as a whole, which I think helped all of us shape those in a way that was both consistent and at the same time really reflected the kind of work that was going on in different places in the slightly different ways that they were already working together. So I think in combination, that was a really useful process that strengthened it for all of us.
Great, thank you, Tim. Thank you for responding as I put you on the spot there. I don't know if others would just like to reflect on the place framework that we've put together, because I know we've had Audit Yorkshire involved in that. I'm just working to see who's put their hands up. Who would like to respond? Tom.
Yeah, I was just going to strongly support, but also make the point that I think we're a part of the country where a lot of this sort of place working was happening already, and there was very good, you know, sort of embedded integrated working. And the thing to flag, I guess, is that the formalisation of all of that, if that's a word, needs we need to sort of guard against some of the benefits we've had from that more, you know, informal working not being lost. So in Leeds, for example, I've chaired for a number of years actually the sort of, if you like, a sort of place chief execs board, but we're sort of morphing into obviously Tim's got the lead responsibility under the arrangements now, with our the other board as well. So we're probably going to move to a sort of quarterly, more strategic arrangement for the wider place stuff that sort of positions under the Health Wellbeing Board, just as an example of how, you know, we're having to sort of adapt with the new system. In some parts of the country, this is completely new to a lot of people, and I think it's maybe just worth us all reflecting on that, you know, that we've got lots of really good stuff going on at the moment, and it's building on that and not risking losing some of that really good working practice that we've got. So that I don't think we will, but I think we just all need to be aware there's a bit of a transition happening.
Thank you very much, Tom. That's helpful. I can see other hands up now. Robin and then Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I agree with everything Tom said as usual, and that's really important. I just think the one thing to emphasise as well is just the inherent connectivity in place between the place-based committees and health and wellbeing boards, and the role of democratic accountability. And that I do think, and having been at LGA conference, I know there's been some very lively discussion from some parts of the country about the sense in which democratic accountability and oversight has felt part of this journey. I don't think it was something I could recognise from West Yorkshire, and I think we shouldn't be complacent about that, but we do need to return to that. And I think if we are looking at reviewing the place committees, that we see the co-production of that review with the board and local health wellbeing boards, for all of the reasons why they exist and why they have a level of oversight in the things that actually determine wellness and care. And I think, you know, in the context as well, just to note, I think it's interesting that we're an integrated care board. And I think that's quite an important slight shift in language that I think we need to kind of consider. And in the context of the care and the social care that local government, voluntary sector and communities provide at such scale, and for the reasons that Tom said earlier around the resource challenges, I think the role of Health Wellbeing Board to be a leveller and a contributor and a co-producer of this is really key. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. There's many points you've made there that we need to keep in mind as we go through in working through place committees, connectivity and success. Joe.
Yeah, I was going to say something very similar to Robin, really, in that we had a conversation yesterday at our health and care partnership about not missing the opportunity to make sure that we see place as a whole and not just as an NHS. And I think that's a really important message for our partnerships, and the opportunity it brings around bringing all the partners together to look at the population as a whole, and the contributions that each of the partners can make. And I think we don't want it to become just to be seen as a delegation of NHS resource. It's how those interactions and conversations and decisions can affect the entire resource that's available to us in place. And I think that's something that we're keen for this next part of our journey to enable us to progress in a different way. And the other thing I would say is that we had a conversation about the alignment of the West Yorkshire and the things that we can do across West Yorkshire geography that make a real difference to local people, and the benefit that that would bring, particularly for me, for Wakefield people.
Thank you, Joe. That's really welcomed. Rob, you've got your hands up, and Councillor Swift, I'm conscious you need to leave shortly, but if there's anything you'd like to share before you go, please let me know. Rob.
Yeah, so I think this is a really good conversation. I'm just noting for anybody watching that we've just heard from Joe, who's got a joint role across local government, the NHS and a provider, Robin, who's got a joint role as Chief Executive Council and the place lead, and Tom and Tim, who have unique roles but are partners in a system, which demonstrate that there's joined up leadership in places, which is built on the arrangements that Tom described, where people have developed this kind of working to fit the relationships and the arrangements in each of the places. And I think that's really important. I think there's two things the board should probably keep in view as we implement these changes and get the place committees working. The first is that most of the work of the system will take place through the places. It's where most of the resources are going to go. It's where most people receive their care. It's where you've got the right arrangements between providers in the place, whether they're the third sector or community interest companies or the NHS. And we need to ensure that as a board, we allow that to happen. And what we're not doing is doing the work twice. So as a board, we need to make sure that people have got the freedom to operate and the support that they need, and that opportunities and risks are escalated appropriately. Otherwise, we leave people to get on with it, I think, is the first thing. Otherwise, we risk additional workload and duplication. I think the second thing the board will need to test is mutual accountability and learning. So you could, if you were not careful, end up with 5 very strong places who are distinct from each other. And I know that's not the way that we work now. And what we need to do is share good practice in each of the places and also have that sense of mutual accountability and support. And that's something that the board can offer, I think, just tests of that through the system. So I think it's really important that we do think about our role as a board in this and make sure that we're adding value.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rob. And I'd add to that sort of our tracking of progress, isn't it, together, and how we support each other and add value. Thank you. Tim, before you leave, thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Chair. Rob's covered quite a bit of what I was going to say, really. I think it's been a really interesting debate and part of a really interesting and important process. And you know, I'd echo what's been said earlier, and you know, thank everyone for the inclusive way in which the whole dialogue about how we develop and shape these structures has taken place. It's been kind of interesting for me personally watching the development of the West Yorkshire Partnership and on the Calderdale Cares almost in parallel, because we sort of started the discussion about how we wanted to do things at place with a very clear view that I'd sort of come to a little bit separately. It's about that, you know, the integration works by bringing people together and letting them work, not by starting with top-down structural change, but by starting with saying, how do we make it easier for people to cooperate and do the right things? I think that dynamic that both you and Rob have touched on in those comments there, you know, what's the balance between local places being different and flexible and responsive, but then also being part of a system that has a duty to deliver the best for everybody and to learn from each other. You know, I think there's a lot of talk about devolution generally in this country, but because we're so centralised, there's a lot of work still to be done in how you make those tensions work in practice. You know, I passionately believe that something that builds from local experience will actually deliver the best outcomes, but also you then do have to have that accountability to say, how do we pick up when a place isn't doing as well as it could be? How do we make sure we're open to learning from each other? So I think it's going to be a really important and fascinating journey over the next few years, which hopefully, and I believe will, you know, show real benefits in improved well-being for our communities.
Thank you, Tim. And you and a number of other colleagues have given us some principles there to be measuring against our success, combined with the points that Becky and Hannah made this morning about making sure that we're working from the experience of people using our services and local residents. And Tim, I don't want to lose something that we had in our final it was our informal advisory group that we had last week between council leaders and NHS chairs on let's remember to be innovative and radical sometimes. We did it well. I'm speaking, these are your words of last Friday.
Yes.
I don't know if you just want to reflect on that. We did it in the pandemic.
Yeah, very much so. Yes, so I think we were talking, weren't we, about measures of success in 2027, and yes, that was one of the things I said. I hope you look back and said, yeah, we've done some really exciting and different things, and we've had the courage to do them. And I think the examples we talked about, and I know some of them already happened, were things like, you know, with the vaccinations, not just how well we work together, but being able to go out to novel places and offer them. And you know, let's think about ways we can offer health and well-being opportunities in our football stadiums and our nightclubs and our workplaces, rather than seeing it as something that always happens in social care settings and hospitals.
Thank you very much. And that very much linked with a theme that when Rob and I attended the National NHS Confed Expo a couple of weeks ago, where Amanda Pritchard, Chief Executive NHS England, talked about how we have to work harder to take care to our residents, not bring them to our services. So thank you for that. Therese, you've offered to talk about Bradford District and Craven's experience, and then we'll move to approving these committee documents. Therese.
Thanks, Kathy. Nothing huge to add. Completely agree with what everybody said so far, but just to let the board know that we've taken the opportunity in Bradford and Craven of this momentous day, the 1st of July, to really rethink our priorities in place. So we've done a lot of thinking actually about how do we really focus on that population and what we do differently for them. So we've reframed our priorities. We've got 5 of them now. We're going to focus all our resources in place onto, and just 2 of them that are really important for us. One is that children and young people's piece, particularly difficult for us in Bradford and Craven. There's been lots in the news, and we're really focusing as partners. We can't solve the problems around children and young people alone, so working really closely with our Children's Services Department to work on that. And really pleased that we're really getting some traction now around our resilient communities work. As you know, we commissioned some work recently around what that out of hospital offer looks like, and we're really moving on that now. And I know that others, to your point, Rob, around sharing, others in our West Yorkshire have asked to share some of that work. So really keen to press ahead with Bradford and Craven, but yes, very happy to share, but really happy with where we are today. And we're a very proud place, but we will also share with you our work, absolutely.
Thank you, Therese. That's very helpful to us to know and welcomed. And what you'll see later, Ian, I'm slightly stealing your thunder, but our proposal for our first full meeting in public as an integrated care board will have a theme of children and young people's services. And your point, Therese, there, and being very open with us about the fact that your place is working on quality improvement and learning at the moment, but there is learning to be shared across other places as well. So we're going to have a focus on that in September. Okay, so colleagues, are you happy? See, I made it a bit more interesting than just signing off some documents. So, are you happy to sign off the terms of reference for our place committees for Bradford District and Craven, Calderdale, Kirklees, Leeds and Wakefield? Are you happy to sign those off for those committees? Yes, great, thank you. And what we also know is that we have worked from a place framework for all our places to be to be ready to operate and to give us the confidence and assurance that we can delegate authority to those places. And we thank colleagues at Audit Yorkshire as well for reviewing that that piece of work as well. Okay, so we're now going to move on to integrated care board committees that we have. So we have our Audit Committee. We have terms of reference there. Jane, is there anything you want to add before we sign those terms of reference off?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I need to reference that later there are some documents around risk management framework, etc., that we would expect to sort of have the chance sort of early on to sort of, you know, give some sort of detailed review of. I'm sure we're comfortable with what's coming today, but I'm sure we will want to look at that and you know, make any relevant proposals. But I think we're happy with the basic terms for now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are we happy to approve the Audit Committee document then? Yes, thank you, thumbs up. Finance, Investment and Performance Committee, we note that we currently don't have a non-exec appointed as the chair for that committee, but we'll confirm that in the coming weeks. Are we happy to approve those terms of reference as they stand now? Yeah, Jonathan, I can particularly see you nodding, which gives me great confidence. Okay, great, thank you. Then we have our Quality Committee. Again, we will confirm a non-exec member to be the chair of that committee shortly. I don't know, Bev and James, is there anything you want to add, or are you happy with us to sign off those terms of reference?
Happy to sign them off, Kathy. I mean, they're based on the NQB guidance, and we've worked with, you know, the wider team on these. So yeah, happy with these.
Great. Okay, colleagues, are you happy to sign them off? Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. The next one is the Integrated Care Board's Renumeration and Nomination Committee, and as Laura mentioned in her introduction, we need to approve the terms of reference today and the membership of that group. I just want to take I suppose a moment. This is the only committee that's existed for the ICB pre being set up as a statutory organisation today. So Rob and I worked with a number of colleagues, including Stephen Gregg and Susie Tilburn in our HR team, to set up a shadow committee. And we brought together a group of people in December last year who were lay representatives across clinical commissioning groups across all 5 places. And through an expression of interest process, 3 people from NHS provider trusts who had an expertise in this. And what I want to reflect is it's been a really robust process, and I'm really pleased we've done this piece of governance. As you have seen from their introductions this morning, the amount of people and recruitment that has taken place to bring together this board to operate from today has been significant. And all 41 other integrated care boards across the country have been doing the same thing. But I'm really pleased that we've had this committee who have been robust and challenging some days. Rob and I have sat in meetings with them where they've really challenged the ways of working to make sure that we get the right result. And it has been so beneficial to us in looking at particularly the diversity of people that we're bringing into the integrated care board, which led to pausing the recruitment for the non-exec members, for example, and working with our Race Equality Network colleagues on improving the way in which we put out a candidate pack, we promote a recruitment campaign, which then brought positive results for us. So I want to thank particularly Keith Ramsey, who's been the Shadow Committee Chair, Keith Ramsey, who's Chair at Mid Yorkshire, Nadja Mirza, who is Deputy Chair at Airedale, who have been our Chair and Deputy Chair of the Shadow Committee and are going to be our interim co-opted members going forward throughout July. And what you can see that has come out of that piece of work is the membership of that committee. I think this is a small symbol of the way in which we work together, that we will have non-exec members of that committee, as you would do in any remuneration committee in any trust provider, but we're going to bring co-opted members in to make sure we continue to have that good tension in terms of scrutiny and challenge, which Nadja and Keith particularly have brought. Rob, do you want to reflect on anything? Sometimes people think that remuneration nomination is quite a dry subject, but it's been quite a robust place that we've worked over the last few months, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's been excellent, and just fits with, go back to our founding principles of believing in good governance, openness and transparency. This has been an excellent example, I think, and probably set the standard for committees in terms of the degree of constructive challenge.
Thank you, Rob. And I also have to give Rob and other colleagues credit in bringing in a principle through that committee of equal pay for equal work, which is really welcome. So again, we've taken the NHS England guidance, we've followed it, but also then in reflecting on how we want to work, we have brought that principle through that shadow committee, which we will now bring into the statutory committee and the way of working as an integrated care board as well. So Rob, thank you for championing that. It's really appreciated. So colleagues, I ask you first of all to approve the membership, and because we don't have our full complement of non-execs, we are proposing our interim chair for this committee, at least for this month, is non-exec member Becky Mulvey, sitting with Jane Madeley as a non-exec member and myself as chair, and then 2 interim co-opted members who are Keith Ramsey, chair of Mid Yorkshire, and Nadja Mirza, who is deputy chair at Airedale NHS. Are you happy with that membership, which will be in place for the next 6 to 8 weeks or so? Yeah, I can see nods. Thank you very much. And that committee will meet today, straight after this meeting, to ratify the decisions on all our appointments. Thank you for people giving their time today to meet. And also we'll meet again on the 19th of July to have oversight of the final 4 appointments to the Integrated Care Board. Can I also ask you if you'd approve the terms of reference for that committee as well? We have thumbs up, nods. Great, thank you. We're nearly there, colleagues, on our way. And then we have the terms of reference for the Transformation Committee. I don't know if someone could just give an overview of the Transformation Committee.
Ian's probably best placed.
Thank you, because this isn't going to meet as regularly, but it
No,
has
that's right. And this is one that we've had quite a lot of debate about whether we actually need it or not. So I think it's one that we'll test over the coming months in terms of its purpose. As we've said, we work on the principle of subsidiarity, and the vast majority of work will be happening at place through the place committees. There are some things where we'll want to do work together on, clinical pathways, service specifications, prescribing policies. And it'll be important that we do those things once and agree them once. And the proposal is that we use this Transformation Committee to work together to develop a sort of a shared approach on those policies. A good example might have been the work that we did a few years ago around stroke services, stroke reconfiguration and optimal service model, where you want a West Yorkshire place to have this conversation, and that'll be the role of this going forward.
Great, thank you. And a discussion that we've also had, Ian, is about that there'll be, we won't have an ethics committee, but I think the ethical decision making, well, is throughout all our governance work, but there might be areas where we need to have a look at ethics, and it would come through this committee. Is that right? Non-clinical and clinical?
Yeah, and we work really closely with James Thomas as the medical director and build that on the work that they've already done around ethics. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah, great. And Becky, I know that you're going to be our non-exec member champion this. I don't know if you've got any reflections. Thumbs up, very happy taking it forward.
Yeah, I've just made a little note in the chat actually, but hearing from places and the mature relationships and the willingness to learn and to challenge, then that's what transformation is all about. And actually, you do need a holding space for that across the ICB, or else we will get sucked into some transactional stuff potentially. So it's really good to have a focus on learning from each other, spreading what we can to support each other, given the challenges that we're going to be facing this year. So pleased to do that.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're happy to approve that, the terms of reference to the Transformation Committee. Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, so then we move on to, we are nearly there, and I suggest then we take a break. Policies and frameworks. So I'm going to take these as a group, but if anyone wants to come in, because Jane, I sense you might want to come in on risk management in a minute. The next policies we're looking at a conflicts of interest policy, involvement framework, risk management policy and framework, and standards of business and conduct policy that we're looking at. Jane, is there anything you want to reflect on, or Jonathan or any other colleagues? Jane.
Yeah, just in terms of particularly around risk management policy and framework, we had a good discussion at a development session recently, many members of us, and obviously, it was really great that everybody was so engaged in that conversation. They need to do that, and you'll see in the appendices to the framework that's here today, there are two key areas, risk appetite and board assurance framework, that are still to be developed, and we agreed that there would be further board discussions around that. But as I said, under the Audit Committee terms of reference, the whole sort of process in which we manage risk throughout the organisation and giving assurance to the board is a key area for the Audit Committee, and we'll be keen to sort of have a look through, because it's quite a detailed document that's come forward today, and I'm sure this will be one where we will try things, learn, and want to iterate a bit because of the scale of what we're trying to cover, but to do it appropriately in partnership with the different committees of the ICB. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got a few hands up now. So Rob, then Hannah.
Yeah, so just two things. So building on Jane's comments around risk, flip side of risk is opportunity, isn't it? And I think setting our risk appetite and our risk tolerance at the right levels is going to be incredibly important for all of us. This starts with our behaviours and principles, I think, where we've talked about sharing risk across the system and retaining accountability, but giving others authority. And I think this is one of the key areas of development for us, and that we'll use to exercise good decision making. So I'm looking forward to the development of those pieces of work. Just to remind board members on my second point about the involvement framework, and if Karen was here, she's taken a much deserved holiday, she would talk about the fact that this is built on probably 6 years work And if you look on the website, there's a report for each of the last 6 years of all of the engagement that we've done with the public, the key themes, the issues, and what we've been doing about them, which speaks to this really. And the framework's been co-produced following an audit that was done by an independent organisation into what we're good at and what we're not good at, even though we've been doing all of this work. So just to reflect the substantial amount of work behind the involvement framework. And I'm really glad that it's one of the things that we're prioritising today.
Thank you. Hannah.
Just to echo that, really, the fact that actually the West Yorkshire Health and Care Partnership has always had involvement as a key sort of tenet of the way that we've wanted to work. And actually, it's not just a policy document, it's an approach, because we cannot, just as Becky described, being open to learning is a key sort of building block of transformation. We have to do all of this with the people of West Yorkshire. They absolutely have to have their voice central to all our work, both at a West Yorkshire level and within place as well. We will not tackle health inequalities if we don't do that with people and communities. So it's more than just a policy document. I think it's actually our approach as a health and care system, and that feels really exciting. And again, I think this isn't the starting point, as Rob said. This builds on lots of work in local places for many years, and particularly the approach taken by West Yorkshire.
Thank you. Hannah, would you just talk to us about the work you're doing to help us bring a citizens or people's forum together to link with the ICB? You're doing Health Watch colleagues.
Yeah. Again, it's part of the work that we're doing to bring people's voices into this level of decision making at West Yorkshire. But I suppose just to stress as well, it's about building on the local as well, so that we already have really good established networks and growing networks in local places. So it's about hearing those voices, those experiences at local place, and bringing that into the West Yorkshire, and the People's Panel will be part of that element, and we're just developing it at the moment. But what's really exciting is we want to do it the real way, in a way that particularly hears the voice of inequalities. So it's definitely not a tick box sort of mechanism. It's how can we really bring people's voices into this level of West Yorkshire decision making.
Great, thank you very much. And I've particularly asked Becky Mulby with her non-exec role around citizens and future generations, and Harris working with us, particularly working on youth forums, and he has a connection into an NHS England, but working with Becky on citizens and future generations to connect with that work as well. So thank you, Hannah, for that. Fatima.
It was just to sort of build on what Hannah's just said, because I think one of the key elements that we sometimes struggle with when it comes to engagement is the terms in which we involve people. So we sometimes don't reflect on what we've already done, and we're not always mindful of some of the imperceptible barriers that people from certain communities have when it comes to contributing and shaping our conversations or the decisions that we make. So I'm really proud of the framework. I think it really proactively puts our stall out about making engagement and involvement meaningful to people, but also does it in a way where we address some of the reasons why they haven't contributed before. And if we get it right, the potential is immense. So absolutely applaud it, and thank you for everyone for their contributions.
Great. Thanks, Fatima. But I feel that we've got so far, haven't we? And I sense everyone's restlessness to keep going and improve, which is great. Rob.
I just wanted to give a shout out really to the fact that this whole involvement framework and the agenda is embraced by our providers too. And there's some fantastic examples from our Mental Health, Learning Disability and Autism Alliance, and from the Association of Acute Trust and the community organisations in this space. So often I think in these conversations we can start, if we're not careful, we sort of drift into, well, I do anyway, you can drift into like commissioner roles. But what we've got here is, foundation trusts with thousands of members who are engaged in decision making and development. We've got Cancer Alliance with some phenomenal work actually around engaging with citizens, and a huge piece of work around what it's like to sit on a waiting list at the moment, which is embedded in the work of our providers. So just wanted to keep reminding ourselves that this is everyone's business and everyone is actually playing into it.
Thank you. I've put in the chat box, Rob or Kate, will you just talk about the workforce forum? Because if you looked through this list, people would wonder why there isn't a terms of reference for a workforce or a people forum for staff. And I just wanted to mention that. I don't know, Rob or Kate, whether you just talk about the plans we have.
So I can start and then Kate can join in. So anybody who's paying any attention will know that the people, this is a people business. That's the first thing to say. From a financial perspective, it's what we spend our money on. From a service perspective, it's who delivers the care or supports delivery of care, or does the engagement work we've just been describing, or make sure the buildings are up to scratch. All of those things are just people issues. And we know that across West Yorkshire, we face all sorts of challenges in retaining and developing our people. And what we've got to do is to make sure that we implement our people strategy and our people plan. And Kate can talk a bit about bringing the people strategy to life, which is her key priority, really, her key objective. But if we're going to oversee the development of our people, our ethos is that we have 100, as I said, I think earlier, we've got 100,000 people working directly for health and care organisations in West Yorkshire. And they're across the independent sector in social care and the NHS, in healthcare. They're in community interest companies like Locality and Spectrum. They're in third sector bodies and they're in NHS institutions. We've probably got about 150,000 people who regularly volunteer. And we've got an estimate of about 400,000 people who are informal carers. And we think that's the workforce, all of those people. It's not just the nurses and doctors who work in an NHS institution, which is what often the narrative comes to. It's all of those people, whether they're working with Richard Vaughtry in a general practice or as a partner in a community interest company, it's all of them. So to make sure that we've got the right approach to people, we need to paint on a broader canvas than just the NHS and the money that flows through this board. And the Integrated Care Partnership, which embodies all of the partners that I've just described, needs and does have oversight at the moment of our workforce and people strategy. And we believe that the people board that exists now, where money flows through universities, flows through Health Education England, flows through NHS England, flows through us, is the right place to oversee the implementation of the people strategy across West Yorkshire that picks up those 100,000 paid staff, the volunteers and the informal carers. So that's the approach that we'll take generally on the strategy. And then in terms of assurance about how we do in our bit, are we making the changes that we need to, then we can do that through Finance Investment Performance Committee and so on, because we'll have indicators around the workforce in those. So that's the intention on this. And I know that it's mirrored in other places too. I can see Tom's got his hand up, and if you look at things like the Health and Care Academy in Leeds, across that space and the oversight of that through Health and Wellbeing Board, etc., that's a really great example.
Great. Tom, we can see you've got your hand up. I just wanted to come to Kate to talk about the people plan, then we'll come to you, and then we'll work through approving those last documents. Kate.
No, thanks, Kathy. And I think Rob's really summarised it very, very well. For me, I think the people board is a core focus, and obviously reporting through to that integrated care partnership board where we can see the people agenda is already a key piece. I'd already thought the same, that, the people agenda runs, it's a thread through absolutely everything. So if I look at all of the other committees, including the Quality Committee, I can see there will always be key people discussions and assurance checks in all of those committees. But I think in terms of true partnership work, that the people board, which is already up and running, I am having a look at that at the moment, and over the next few weeks I'm meeting with all the current members, but wider than that, just to be absolutely clear, key again, that we've got the real focus right across, that we're engaged correctly with all of the members, and make sure that we have a sufficient coverage of members across before the first of those next meetings in September. But for me, as Rob said, I think that's where the people plan needs to really come alive. I presented that at we gave an update at the last of the last partnership boards, and there is those sort of 5 core pillars. But I think quite rightly, as we've touched on with other agendas today, that the prioritisation is going to be key. You know, there are some big people challenges that there's no getting away from that, and we need to make sure that that board is really looking at what effectively are the core challenges across the system. But certainly in my early weeks, the conversations I'm having with partners across all sectors really tells me how key the people agenda is for everybody. I've met, you know, with all the workforce place leads as well, really committed to this agenda, which is very positive to see, I have to say.
Great. Thank you very much, Kate. Tom.
Thanks, Kathy. Just to strongly support this, to both what Rob and Kate were saying, and I do think this is sort of central to our ability to succeed, because, you know, particularly at this point, if you talk to any employer at the moment, they're struggling, and I can't see that going away in the short term or even the medium and long term. And I think the more we make sure that we're organisations that people want to work in and want to stay in, we think about those retention issues, that's going to be critical. The financial impact of, you know, the pay situation is critical, both within the health organisations, but also critically within ours and other organisations, particularly thinking of the third sector as well as ourselves. And I think there's difference as well in the labour markets across the region. So we tend to have a different competition against retail and hospitality, perhaps to some other parts of the region who struggle in other ways. I just wanted to also really support what Fatima said in terms of the. I do think the key to this as well is, you know, that starting point of every individual in our organisation has been able to be themselves and to feel confident and being able to achieve their potential regardless of their always on merit and never on barriers around race, ethnicity, religion, sexuality, disability, gender, age, etc. And I do think that needs to be right at the heart of what we're doing as well. We've had the LGA conference this week and talking to other chief execs from across the country. And again, I think we all need to recognise that we are not, we've got to get better in that area. And however good you are, you've got to get better. And that links directly to the engagement point as well, because there are certain communities, as we've found from the pandemic, who don't trust institutions like ours. And we've got to recognise that, front it up, and find ways to do more on that agenda. So just a big sort of shout out to this, and I hope that this will be a regular sort of item on our on our agendas moving forwards.
Thank you, Tom. Those are all incredibly helpful points, and we will be weaving this into and reporting on it and giving us an opportunity to debate and scrutinise and track progress and action through this forum, as well as the partnership, what was the partnership board, now the Integrated Care Partnership. Rob, you want to come back on that, and then we'll move to signing off these documents.
Just to say that what a fundamentally important point Tom's just made, and also if we look at the messenger review into leadership in the health and care system, it points very strongly to equality, diversity and inclusion being everyone's business. And it's people who look like me and Tom to shout this out as much as others who've got other protected characteristics. And I think it's important for all board members to be fairly assertive in this space, really. And just to give people some hope, I guess, there's a fantastic case study being published by Leeds and York Partnership on their experiences around Red Kite View and employing local people. The 100-odd jobs that were required to open that unit, many of them came from people in Armley, which is the third, I think it's the third most deprived ward in Leeds, and many of the people were either long-term unemployed or never worked. So we can use our approaches to recruit different sorts of people to really good jobs.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you to colleagues for responding on that. I took us down a different pathway there, but I wanted to reflect that we hadn't missed it for anyone watching this, and particularly members of staff as they watch the work of the Integrated Care Board. So thank you for sharing that. So can I just take us through the approval of the conflicts of interest policy, involvement framework, risk management policy and framework, and the standards of business conduct policy? Colleagues, are you happy to approve those? Yes, great, thank you. And then we have some last points here. We are asking the board to authorise Rob Webster as our chief exec to sign off place partnership agreements across all 5 places: Bradford District and Craven, Calderdale Cares, Kirklees Health and Care Partnership, Leeds Health and Care Partnership and Wakefield District Health and Care Partnership. Are we happy to authorise Rob to do so? Yes, great. 2 more points. The board asked to authorise Chief Exec to sign the following Section 75 agreements, again across our 5 places, around the frame for Bradford District and Craven Framework Partnership Agreement relating to the commissioning of health and social care services. Bear with me as I read these all out. Calderdale Better Care Fund Plan, Kirklees Integrated Healthy Child Programme, Kirklees Better Care Fund, Leeds Continuing Healthcare for People Who Have a Learning Disability, Better Care Fund Partnership Agreement, and Wakefield Framework Partnership Agreement related to the commissioning of health and social care services. Do you authorise Rob to sign those agreements? Yes, nods, thumbs up. It's very helpful. Thank you. Last one. Board is asked to authorise Chief Exec to sign primary medical service delegation agreement on behalf of us as an integrated care board. You're happy to support that and approve? Yes, thumbs up, nods. Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for getting the governance business done that we needed to today to give us the readiness to operate, as well as the discussions that we've had around the principles and ways of working. I suggest that we take a break now in the interest of making sure that people have regular breaks in our meetings together. And could I ask you to come back? It's 10:38 now. If you'd come back at 10:48, which means that we're still on track for our meeting, and take 10 minutes now to have a comfort break. So for people watching this live stream, we're just going to take a 10-minute break and then come back and start again on item 6 of the meeting. Thank you.
ICB policy in place for the 1st of July. And you have already approved a number of those as part of the previous item because they form part of the governance handbook. And there are a number of further ones today that form part of this report that we'll be asking you to approve. There were also a further group of policies identified where we knew that we would need a single ICB policy, but also knew that it wouldn't be possible to do that for the 1st of July for a variety of reasons, but in quite a number of instances because we're still awaiting new regulations, new guidance, and so it was best to wait for that in order to move to a single ICB policy. For those, what we've done is develop a covering policy statement, which should absolutely be read in conjunction with the existing or outgoing CCG policies. And what we're asking you to do today is to approve both the policy statements and to agree that we will continue with those existing policies temporarily to enable that work to happen to move to a single one. We're also asking today for you to agreed to carry forward 2 further policies that are actually delegated to the Quality Committee for approval, and they're detailed in the report. Under Appendix 8 of the report, you will see that you have a specific brief in relation to employment policies and a proposal for the harmonisation of those. There are a large number of employment policies. It's a very big suite of documents. So we are seeking your approval to roll those forward temporarily, and we are also seeking your approval to an amended process for the approval of those policies as that work happens. And we'd like to propose that the executive management team are given responsibility for preparing those policies and recommending their approval to the Remuneration and Nomination Committee, which will make sure that we have both executive and non-executive oversight and assurance on those. It will require an amendment to the scheme of reservation and delegation and also the terms of reference of the Remuneration and Nomination Committee. So we're asking you to approve for us to be able to do that. The final comment I'll make before I pass to Ian is that whilst approval of most of our policies is reserved to the board, with the exception of a very small number that are detailed in there, our committees are going to play a really crucial role for us in reviewing the operation of these policies once they're in force and assuring the board around the operation of those. So it is very much an part of our integrated governance framework. It is not just a board responsibility. I'll just pass to Ian just to say a couple of points in relation to the policy harmonisation around the patient access thresholds. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. So as we've set out in the paper, the ICB will take on responsibility for policies relating to access to services, prescribing from CCGs. And I think the fortunate thing in our system is that the CCGs have been working pretty closely together for the last 4 or 5 years through the Joint Committee of CCGs to look at some of these policies, and we've already gone quite a long way in terms of having a standardised approach across West Yorkshire. That said, there's a group of access policies and a group of prescribing policies that are still, where there's still differences across the system, and we want to harmonise those policies within the right time frame. So what we're proposing is that we give ourselves 12 months to do that. We want to take our time because we want to get it right, having the right clinical engagement and ownership, doing the right engagement with citizens and consultation with citizens, understanding the financial implications so that we're making good decisions around investment, and understanding the equality and quality impacts of any changes. So what we're proposing is that we have a 12-month process of harmonisation. As I mentioned in the previous item, we propose that we'll use the Transformation Committee to do this work, and myself and James will be working really closely with the Transformation Committee to develop a kind of a sort of a forward plan for that. But I guess it's for the board to note the position on that variation and the plan to address that over the next 12 months.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura and Ian, for putting that across so succinctly. What I want to do, if anyone wants to make any detailed comments, as I said previously with the policies in the previous item, please could you email Laura and Stephen Gregg, Laura Ellis and Stephen Gregg, with any specific comments. But I think what we're asking for today is a supporting principle of this direction of travel. All integrated care boards in the country today will be looking at ways of working, including the harmonising. I thought it was a good word you used there, Laura, the harmonising of policies and coming together for us, particularly across 5 places. So we really want your support today on directions of travel, any points of principle to follow, and any detailed comments, please could you send them to Laura and Stephen. Rachel, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair. I just wanted to make 2 points. I do think just on the complaints, concerns and compliments, I've got that into the wrong order. I just want to say that I do think having concerns there is really important for us as an ICB, because as we know from the Ockenden review, there is a number of issues that don't make their way into a formal complaints process, but that can give you a real insight into kind of the health of a system. So I do think that's a really important distinction, and it was really helpful to see that anything that is just a verbal comment can be taken seriously. Working with our children's services recently and learning from some of the best practice from Leeds, we have looked at how we can build a restorative approach into how we handle complaints, and I do wonder whether that might be something we can share, and I'm sure Tom would be the same with this, because it's very much about how you can deal with complaints in an earlier way by having those kind of more restorative conversations. And just lastly, on the employment policies, it'd be really helpful to have sort of partner involvement in some of those, because obviously what we don't want to do across the system is take resources from, you know, other bits of the system, obviously where we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, as the expression goes. So certainly how we can look at that workforce on, you know, on a broader health and care system footprint, that would be great.
Great, and I agree with you on that point, Rachel. Rob and I had a discussion earlier this week on that, about the appropriate and right engagement. And for example, as you're saying there'll be staff side engagement and working with colleagues who are genuinely can share their lived experience to inform those policies. Thank you. Anyone else got any comments at all on just the principles of these policies and the approach? Tim?
Yes, thank you, Kathy. We had quite a long set of conversations at the governance working group around how best to do this, which is what Laura and Ian have shared in terms of the outcome of that. I think it is important for the board to recognise that we're effectively trying to look to balance 2 risks. One is the risk of challenge for non-standardisation, and that remains whilst we haven't yet made the progress in harmonising all of them, and I think the board should be aware of that. But that is against and offset against the risk of making changes without due process and not understanding the consequences of change in a sufficient detail. And the view was taken that when we balanced those 2, that this was the right approach.
Okay, thank you very much. And from this, there'll be a work plan, as you say, in taking that forward. So this board can have oversight, we can connect it with the appropriate committees, and we can see the principles and elements that we're all looking for in work taking this forward. Rob?
I just wanted to reinforce the points that Rachel made about complaints, compliments and concerns. And just to make sure that we, I think, consider 2 things. First is, how do we hardwire the intelligence coming out of complaints, concerns and compliments into the triangulation of risk? Because we've got you know, finance performance information, we've got incident reports, and then we'll have these sorts of issues coming through as well. So as an executive, we've been thinking, and Bev and James particularly, about how do we you know, triangulate these bits of intelligence to come up with some insights into where we might want to have another look. And on the compliment side, I think it's really important that we amplify positive work and positive feedback, because staff, anytime anybody goes to anywhere delivering health and care in the system, whether it's a care home, a GP surgery, you know, a community clinic, a hospital, you'll see cards on the wall from people saying, thanks, it was great.
Yeah.
But we don't really have that visibility of those sorts of things at this level. So it's really important, as Michael West reminds us, to keep reinforcing positive things when they happen. So I really would like us to make sure that we're clocking and making it easier for people to say thank you and to compliment our teams, as well as raise concerns and complaints when they're warranted as well. We can, I think, coming out of this meeting, we can just make sure that that happens through the executive if the board's happy with that.
Okay, thank you, Rob. That's really helpful. So thank you for those comments and contributions to share the work that's taken place, as well as the principles to take forward. So I can't see any more hands up. So I'm going to ask you, we'll just go through this, but please bear with me again, the number of things to approve. So to approve compliments, concerns, complaints policy and freedom of information, environmental information regulations policy. We happy to approve those? Yeah, if you can give me thumbs up or nods, that's really helpful. The next one is to approve the following statements and agree to carry forward existing clinical commissioning groups policies temporarily. And you've heard then about how we will take that forward and harmonise and review. This is anti-fraud, bribery and corruption policy, health and safety policy, non-clinical incident management policy statement, information governance policy statement and the procurement policy statement. Are we happy to agree that? Yeah, nods, thank you. Next one is to agree that existing clinical commissioning group Mental Capacity Act, Deprivation and Liberty Safeguards, Safeguarding Children and Adults policies can be carried forward temporarily, and note that the Quality Committee will oversee and approve the development of a single integrated care board policy approach. Are we happy to agree and support that? Yep, Rob, you've got your hands up.
I just wanted to make a point about the things like counter fraud, information governance, etc. Really, now that policies are agreed, I think this is about communication and reinforcement throughout the system, particularly with our staff. So we'll make sure that we take that forward.
Okay, thank you. And the last two sections, to approve a process for employment policy transfer and review, which Laura outlined earlier in the document, and link to that, approve a group to come together, which we're going to delegate to executives to have a review of and harmonisation of employment policies to be reported to a future Renumeration and Nominations Committee of the Integrated Care Board. Are we happy to support that? And we'll note that in the action log as well. Yeah, great. Thumbs up and nods. Thank you very much, everybody. I know we could spend more time on that section, and I think I sense from my colleagues that more work needs to be done for us then to have debates on principles and ways of working going forward. But thanks to everyone who has done that piece of work already, and we'll have an overview and work plan going forward as a continuing action. Okay, so now we move on to item 7. We are asking support to approve today integrated care board special lead roles. So these are roles that we have a statutory requirement for. This isn't the end of special lead roles and remits, and what you'll also note is these are primarily executive roles, and we only have one non-executive champion role, which is a conflicts of interest guardian, and more will be added to that. Laura, is there an overview you'd like to give before we approve these statutory lead roles?
Thank you. Yeah, I think you've largely covered it in the introduction. I was just going to comment that obviously there is a requirement to assign these special roles, mostly because they're either a statutory requirement required by the Health and Care Act or by NHS England in response to that Act. All of the roles are set out at Annex A, and as you say, at the moment, with the exception of the conflicts of interest guardian, all the roles are executive roles, but we are expecting to have further non-executive champions identified once we've have all the non-executive members appointed. The only change I just wanted to flag with you is that, and this came after the circulation of the agenda, is that we have been advised that we need to appoint a board lead for Down syndrome, and we have identified Dr. James Thomas to lead on that role. So that's in addition to the all of the other roles that are set out at Annex A.
Thank you. Colleagues, are we happy to support our colleagues taking on these roles and approve those remits? Yes, can see nods. Great, thank you very much. And as Laura said, there'll be further ones. I think on the executive side and through our partnership and senior responsible officer roles, we will look ourselves to see which remits and champion roles we would like to take on. As you know, within our partnership, people wear at least 2 hats, and that's the right way of working in an ecosystem of our partnership. And also with on the non-exec side, when we have our third and fourth non-exec members confirmed, we will then confirm, likely to be at the September meeting in public, those non-exec remits. So that includes freedom to speak up, guardian, champion, and in relation to the Ofcom review, a maternity services champion as well. As non-execs, we'll be meeting over the summer to agree that and propose it. I wanted to invite Harry Salton at this point just to talk about children and young people's representation due to his connection with NHS England Youth Forum and our West Yorkshire Youth Forum, because this is something that's also a remit, but we want to make it work for our partnership. So Harris, I don't know if you briefly want to share some thoughts on that.
My first thought is it's great. It's the first time we're having children and young people at the centre of a board by having a named executive for children and young people. And I think the important thing to note is it doesn't stop there. You've got Becky for future generations having it at the centre of the board, me for children, young people and future generations. And it's not tokenistic. There were 6 things that were mentioned as an example of what this executive lead does. And one of them was championing co-production with children, young people and families, which is something we do amazing in West Yorkshire, which will be further championed. We've got the youth collective and the involvement for young carers. But as well as championing this integrated care board level, we've got fantastic work at local levels through the youth forums, youth councils, Youth Watch, all the youth groups which have a massive voice in health and social care. And what this executive champion, in my vision, does is group this all together and stick it on the integrated care board and say, this is, young people are at the forefront of this, and let's not forget about them with this new review, with this new change to healthcare. We'll have them right at the centre. So it's great that we're having young children, young people championed.
Great, thank you, Harris, and thank you for your work. We saw you in action at the NHS Confed National Conference talking on behalf of young people at a national level, so it was a great pride to see you out there. Becky, do you want to reflect, or anyone else? We're going to be looking at our first full meeting in public, having a theme of children and young people in September. Are there any reflections from you, Hannah, and any place leads as well, on how we can put this at the heart of our work?
I just want to say that what I love about the involvement piece that Hannah's brought to the board and what we've just signed off demonstrates that all of us here are here on behalf of and with a whole body of work, a whole set of relationships, an awful lot of connections in and through communities. But also we don't shy from the difficult conversations. So we have some very difficult conversations to happen here, whether it's about rationing, whether it's about how we allocate resources. But the engagement piece, the collaboration with communities and people has to happen as close to those communities as possible. It doesn't happen here. So we aren't symbolic titular heads. We are deeply networked and connected into those communities, and we will continue to be there as much as we possibly can so we can do the job here, which is some of those difficult conversations, really well.
Great, thank you, Becky. Jo Webster and then Therese.
Yeah, and Harris, I really welcome your input into this board, and I'm looking forward to working with you in Wakefield. We have a really strong and vibrant, active youth council, and it's really sort of shone a light on the way in which young people receive care, feel when they're waiting for care, and the impact it has on their lives. And I think it's just so refreshing. And anybody that was involved in Wakefield's recent engagement with young people around our ASD services and the enormous amount of anxiety they faced as they waited for care over 12 months, it was profound, the impact that had, and we heard it firsthand, and that really gave us insight into how we wanted to change things, and we have made some significant improvements. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I think it's such an important role in our discussions.
Great, thank you very much, Jo. Therese, then Tim, and then we'll move on to the next item.
Thanks, Kathy. It's just to big up Bradford. So, of course, we've got Capital of Culture, and we are absolutely delighted. And it was led a lot by children and young people. I think you would have seen them in the coverage. So, Harris, I think getting you keyed into the work that we're doing, got fantastic plans over the next couple of years, and maybe it can be a West Yorkshire of culture and not just a Capital of Culture, but we'll make connections.
Thank you. Tim.
Yes, so thank you, Harris, and I just want to note as well, thank you for the work you've done in Leeds, both recently with the CCG and prior to that with Leeds Community Health Trust. I think you've both helped both the wider partnership as a result of that work, so really grateful for that. I suppose I wanted just to comment as the chair of the West Yorkshire Children's Board. I know there's a report going to the System Leadership Executive next week, looking at some of the work we've been doing. And I do believe that the really important piece around this is making sure that we get the right balance between what we look at West Yorkshire and how we work at a West Yorkshire level to the really brilliant work in a lot of places across West Yorkshire, and how we provide assurance through to the ICB board of what's happening within the place setting, because Joe's mentioned Wakefield, I could mention Leeds, and other colleagues could mention work in Bradford and right across the system. So let's not lose sight of how important communities are in which children and young people grow and develop, and those communities are hyper local usually, and I think that is a really important point for us to bear in mind when we're talking through the sort of children and young people's agenda.
Thank you, Tim. Ian, we're completely stealing your thunder on the item later on our September board, but I think what you're starting to hear is that some items, reports that we can reference and work from so that it's a really robust discussion. Okay, Rob, and then we will move on to the next item.
Just two reflections on the conversation. I think whenever there are discussions about integrated care and joining up services, people's mindsets often default to older people. And actually what we know is that this is an agenda for all ages. And we need to make sure that whenever we think about integrated care, it's all ages, it's children, it's working age adults, it's older adults too. And on the children's agenda, it's often councils who take the strategic lead on children in places. And this is an opportunity for us to really reinforce the importance of working together. So that's the first thing. And secondly, there are some really good West Yorkshire-wide pieces of work which supplement the place-based working, which is so positive in many ways. And what I particularly pull out is the work we're doing on being a trauma-informed system. Mm-hmm. And the neglect or abuse that people might have experienced in childhood then impacts upon their lives and their life chances, and how we become more informed about that and how we become better at preventing it is going to be fundamental for us, I think, as a system.
Thank you, Rob. I think and that work that has been done, including a conference on trauma-informed care with the Violence Reduction Unit in the recent weeks, has been incredibly powerful. Karen, we note that also young people are carers in our communities as well, and we mustn't forget that and weave that into our work and oversight. Okay, thank you very much for that discussion. And as colleagues write up these notes, we will pick out the themes and reports and areas of focus for our next meeting. Okay. I hope you're okay to stay with us till 11:30 as we just get through our last items together. I'm now going to hand over to Jane. This seems a bit strange, but it's the right thing to do in terms of managing conflicts of interest, but hand over to Jane now for the next item 8.
Thanks, Kathy. So I think this agenda item is, I think, the last piece of kind of the governance authority decision making that we need to do today as a board. Colleagues may recollect from the slide that Laura showed earlier in terms of the functions and decision map for the West Yorkshire care system, the importance of the integrated care, the partnership board, integrated care partnership and partnership board within that structure. And that will also be constituted as a statutory committee as part of the new constitutions. In order to do that, we have to establish, in order to establish it as a statutory committee, we need to appoint a founder member from the ICB, and this paper is the proposal that we would appoint Kathy as our ICB chair. I'll ask Ian if there's anything else that he wanted to add with regards to the paper.
Yeah, I mean, you've covered that really well and succinctly, Jane. That's what we're asking for. We're proposing that Kathy is the founder member of the ICP. We've also attached the revised terms of reference for the partnership board to reflect this new role that it will take following these statutory changes. But we've been working as a partnership board for over 3 years now. The partnership board has set the strategic direction for the ICS. we see this as a seamless transition into the new arrangement. So it's approval for Cathy as the founding member and support for the terms of reference.
So can I just pause and see if there are any questions or comments, or are people happy to approve? I can see no hands up, so I'm going to take that as approval. Okay, thank you. Back to you, Cathy.
Thanks, Jane, and thanks for stepping in for that. And for anyone watching that thinks that's a bit of a strange thing to do, it's about managing conflicts of interest there and making sure that I wasn't involved in influencing the decision there. So thank you, colleagues, for your support. And I know that we agreed from the last partnership board meeting at the beginning of June that we'd work together, as I said earlier, to connect together well and set it up for success on how the integrated care partnership, formerly the partnership board, particularly with local authority leaders and council chief execs, comes together and works with this integrated care board. So thank you. So we then have Ian looking ahead, which is something, Ian, you and I've talked about for many months now. What is the programme of work for this integrated care board going forward, and ways in which we work together? And to note for the minutes and for anyone watching, as an integrated care board, as the membership has been work in progress, we have met together once in April and once last month in private informal sessions to establish ourselves as a new board and get to know each other and develop ourselves as a board team, and also think through together what our work plan is and priorities are for the next 12 to 18 months. So this has very much come from that. And there is nothing in some ways done behind closed doors, because the result of those discussions is being shared with you today. So Ian, have you got an overview for us?
Yeah, thanks, Cathy. So as you've said, it's the purpose of this item is to introduce a high level forward plan, recognising that it's going to be subject to change for the next 12 months. So we're proposing that the board meets in public every second month, and the first meeting proper really is going to be in September. And what we're proposing is that we've got a kind of a generic agenda structure for those meetings that is made up of standing items, so items that we'll discuss routinely at every meeting, cyclical items that reflect the sort of the key decisions and sort of the rhythm of the business really that the board needs to undertake, and deep dive items. And those deep dive items either reflect significant risks that we face as a board, or as Rob touched on, significant opportunities that we face as a board. So Appendix 1 of the paper sets out the proposed generic board structure, and you'll see that there. The first 11 items on that agenda are those standing items, and you'll hopefully notice there that we've got the citizen voice item as number 5, and how we'll be working with Becky Mulby around ensuring that we have the right sort of citizen voice item there, and that it's done in a kind of a sort of a meaningful way. What we'll try and do is link the citizen voice item to the deep dive item later on, so that it informs that conversation. We've then got a set of standing items relating to strategy, governance and oversight, including the integrated dashboard, which will be in place for September, as well as the board assurance framework and the committee reports that will be starting to come through. And then we've got those sort of focus on items, and the sort of the core sort of cyclical business items. What we've got in Appendix 2 is a sort of a high level forward plan now for those cyclical items and the sort of the focus on topics. As you said, Cathy, we'd like the board to support that we use the September meeting to have a focus on children and young people service, but then for the sort of the future focus on topics, that is determined and driven by our board assurance framework, which, as we've said, will set out those big risk areas and big opportunity areas. So it's really support for that approach, support for the generic sort of board structure that we've set out, as well as the sort of the items that we've identified there as part of the forward plan. Thanks, Cathy.
That's great, thank you. And I suppose to translate for anyone watching this, staff or members of the public, when we talk about looking at a board assurance framework or an integrated performance report, that will be giving us oversight of risks and concerns in the system, as well as things that are going well and best practice, such as elective recovery, so people waiting for operation, surgery, access to primary care, ambulance waiting times and things like that. So these things are not forgotten, they are high priority and they will come through that kind of reporting, but our choice to focus on a certain thematic area also enables us to look at best practice as well as areas of concern, such as looking at children and young people services, just to clarify. So we've got a few hands up now. And I note that any other business that's coming through as well. So we've got Julian, Therese, Hannah, then Jane. Julian.
Thanks very much, Kathy, and thanks, Ian. That all makes a lot of sense. Mine's just a very specific point about timing. We've got winter planning down for November, and I think you know what I'm going to say next, but it's going to be a tough winter. We're going to be put under enormous pressure and challenge across the whole of our health and care system, given what's been discussed previously and given the workforce issues that were highlighted as well. So it really is just a question about timing and whether September might not be more prudent in terms of getting ahead of some of the big challenges we're likely to face, but recognise that strategy refreshes and finances is crucial as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Julian. I think that's a fair challenge, and I think we probably need to weave it into every meeting from September onwards. So, Ian, is that fair challenge?
I was going to make that point. I think it's probably September and November and probably January as well, depending on where we get to. So, yeah, it's really helpful.
Great. Thank you, Julian. Therese, then Hannah.
Thanks, Chair. Just to plea, Ian, if I may, your topic, elective recovery, if we could broaden that to care recovery, and then we can look at primary care, mental health, community services, where we know we've also got recovery issues. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And that comes back to a point that colleagues in our partnership made at the partnership board meeting in early June about looking at not just discharge, but looking at the whole flow as well across our system and across places. Thank you. Hannah, next.
Yeah, so it's been a theme of the conversation already, but I suppose just to say, in terms of bringing the people of West Yorkshire into this meeting, it isn't just about a citizen voice at the start of the meeting. That just helps us frame it from an individual's perspective. But actually, the people's voices and experiences will be in the strategy. It will be, and it should hopefully, if we can develop into the dashboard, and an ask of all the committee reports that come as well. So just to say that that's not the only way that we'll bring in people's voices in there. And I suppose the other thing that I'll just reflect on as we're going into the winter, if we're thinking about it if we think about the people of West Yorkshire and their experiences at the moment, particularly going into the cost of living crisis, and where that is reflected, and if that needs to be reflected within the Integrated Care Board or not, I would see it as big as having to need for thinking about COVID planning, but that might happen at a local place. But I think it would be good for us to be aware of that and recognise that you know what is coming from an individual, particularly with that impact of inequalities as we move into winter.
Yeah. Thank you, Hannah. So it's a challenge, and I invite you to continue to challenge us on this, how we weave it into every single agenda item and the ways of working in our scrutiny. Okay, thank you. Just bear with me as I go between chat box and hands up. Rob.
2 comments. So thank you for this. It's really looking really good. I think under the strategy item, we'll probably want to pick up feedback from the partnership board. I will need to pick up feedback from the partnership board somewhere. And secondly, I just wondered if it was worth us taking some of the fantastic annual reports that are done by, you know, West Yorkshire Association of Acute Trust and the Mental Health, Learning Disability and Autism Collaboratives. I'm always really impressed by what they describe, and as our collaboratives are a fundamental part of what we do, it just might be worth receiving those.
Thank you. We can note that, and that then sits alongside regional and national reports coming out for us to respond to, Ogden Review, Messenger Review, for example, and the Fuller Stock Take as well. Rob and I attended a regional NHS England session yesterday, which Claire Fuller came to talk to us about primary care and her Stock Take review. Okay, thank you. I can't see any more hands up, so I think there's a supporting principle of the approach, bringing certain things forward to prioritise them, bringing some principles more to the forefront, in particular citizens' voices. We don't want it to be tokenistic, it needs to be embedded. Okay, thank you. And genuinely, as we go forward together, I said this in one of our informal development sessions, you need to tell us what's working as integrated care board members, what's working, what's not, how's the documentation coming through, how are we making it accessible for people who are interested in our work and particularly come and observe meetings or read documents, and are we getting things done and seeing the progress that we want to see together? Rob.
Just on that point, really, just to say thank you to the team for getting all of the papers out a week ahead, and I think that's part of our approach, which is to give board members as much time as possible to read and digest the papers. and to focus on really the issues rather than explaining what the papers say. So I think we should really hold ourselves to account really for let's get the papers out. If we can be planful, we can get the papers out appropriately, and then let's focus on the conversation in the meetings.
Thank you. Okay, so we support that approach. It's work in progress, Ian. It's iterative, and I'd really like to build in at the end of every one of these public meetings and private development sessions a point of learning. What worked today, what didn't, what we could improve upon, and then we can keep noting that as a learning log. And it's something we did in the Shadow Remuneration and Nominations Committee. We kept a learning log of anything that we'd learnt along the way after every meeting. Okay, thank you. Thank you to colleagues. It's work in progress, so please be critical friends as we come together on the format and content. Okay, we come to any other business now. I think we've got two. Becky, do you want to go first, or do you feel that we've addressed what you wanted to raise?
I think we have, but I think it's still worth recognising this because we are doing this in public, and being as transparent and open about the conversations we're having really matters. So the conversations we were having prior to this meeting were about the nature of risk and who bears risk, and our risk as an organisation system, but individuals listening to this, the risk they're bearing, whether they're waiting on a trolley in an ambulance, wondering whether they're going to have a wee, through to waiting for a long time looking after their child who's violent and aggressive at home. So I think just recognising that we understand those risks, and we will be, and working on how do we escalate those, or how do we move from the complex, really important systemic work we have to do to build those relationships at the moment where we just have to say, we just have to meet that now if we're harming people. So I just wouldn't want that to go away from here as people see the very lovely conversations we're having, not understanding that we are committed to ensuring that we do no harm. And that means that we have got some quite difficult work to do reasonably quickly. This isn't something that can wait 6 months' time. So we have asked if we can have some recognition, a paper about the nature of those risks for individuals and communities in relation to, as Tom, as Hannah's been talking to, increasingly difficult financial context for us, whilst we work out how we're going to best spend the NHS pound to meet those needs.
Great. Thank you very much, Becky. I appreciate that. And as I said, as you know, at the start of the meeting, to have an update for the board, we don't have a board assurance framework or integrated performance report today. We've had updates to the operational plan. So I think a combined brief and update to all integrated care board members would be really welcomed out of this meeting, so we're informed. And those observing the work of the integrated care board will see that work in action coming in particularly from September. Rob, you've got any other business, but also whether you'd like to respond to Becky before you take your any other business as well.
Yeah, thanks. I think Tom's got one as well. If you thought there were only two, there's actually three. So
thank you.
So responding to Becky, I think we're entirely right. What we've always got to do is put ourselves in others' shoes and to understand what the context is of their lives. And the whole point of integrated care systems is to address the mental, physical and social needs of people. And we can only do that if we understand what's going on in their communities and in their households. We can do that because we've got good connections through the third sector, through statutory organisations and through communities themselves. We can also make a difference through the way we spend our money in terms of those social and economic benefits. And I think this is something we should return to as a board. I think my only other business was to, I think we've noted that we've started something today, but it also means that something is finished. And we've got 5 clinical commissioning groups that at midnight cease to exist. And I just wanted to pay tribute to all of the people who worked in them in the past 10 years. And also to Tim, Carol, Jo, Robin, and Helen, who's not here today because she's moving on. Because you know, by objective measures, they've been outstanding. They've done fundamentally positive work in communities, and they've created the platform by which our place-based working can be successful for the future. So I don't think we should finish the board meeting today without saying thank you to those 5 individuals for their leadership, and to everybody who's been involved in the clinical commission groups, what they've delivered and achieved. I think it's a bit of a system that doesn't always get the credit that it deserves. And in the last 2 years, been absolutely magnificent during the pandemic, and in the previous 8 years has taken huge strides forward in thinking about population health. So I just want to say thank you to them.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Rob. And to note, we put together a staff briefing this week where I think over 2 sessions we had over 500 staff from now former clinical commissioning groups to talk to them about their employment and how they're feeling. We've been running those sessions since December last year, but I'm also pleased that over the last few days there have also been celebration events going on as well to support clinical commissioning groups and really have a moment of reflection. Thank you, Rob, for saying that, and thanks to all colleagues in former CCGs now coming in to be part of our integrated care board for all the work they've done. As I said at the staff briefing this week, they've not only got on with the day job, they've responded to COVID and to these legislative changes that have come from government and NHS England, and they've done a phenomenal job. Okay, Tom, I think you had any other business, is that right?
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. We're so integrated as a system that Rob said exactly what I was going to say. So I cannot say it any better. And I just wanted to say exactly the same thing.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, colleagues, that is the end of our first statutory meeting together. Thank you for getting through the governance business. We've got a number of things. First of all, as integrated care board members, you are appointed and we have 4 more to appoint, and that includes Rob as our chief exec. We have approved our governance handbook. We've particularly agreed on a number of principles in bringing in lived experience, including taking on Health Watch's recommendations into our work. And we've got a variety of principles to take forward, particularly into our first meeting in September. I just want to particularly note case studies to be brought into decision making and the committee work that will come out of this to make sure that we are on track and delivering what we said we would. So thank you. I'm very proud to work with all of you and to be part of this partnership, and I'm grateful to you for your contributions and preparation for today's meeting, and I'll see you shortly. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.